I bet you all wondered who I am and why on earth I'm standing up here. I just had a couple of people say, where are you from? What are you doing? Well, and David Wood, the most creative, inspirational person I know on this side of the pond, apologized to me for not introducing me to you all. So I'll just say a few words about myself now. Hi, I'm Natasha Vita-Moore. I collaborated with David on this conference. Humanity Plus is the minor league on this. The whole conference has been organized by the London Transhumanist Association and David Wood. But Humanity Plus is an international organization. It is the leading transhumanist organization, but not the only one. There are many transhumanist organizations in different countries throughout the world. And I will be speaking later on this afternoon. So just by way, I'm making a joke out of it, just so that you all know. This afternoon, we've got a bevy of really fascinating speakers. Before lunch, we have two that I'm so delighted who are here. And the first speaker I am pleased to announce, welcome to the stage, Calum Chace, who is also, among many things, he is the author of a book which we're all going to be fascinated by concerning Pandoras Brain. So welcome, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Can you hear me at the back? Sounds like not. Can anybody hear me at the back? It's on. Well, is that better? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I have a sneaking suspicion that I'm not the only person in this room who grew up reading a lot of science fiction. And in my case, it was quite helpful because it helped me get through my university degree. Because after all, what is science fiction but philosophy in fancy dress? It wasn't until a couple of decades later that I read Ray Kurzweil in the year 2000. And he made me consider the quite astounding proposition that conscious, superintelligent machines might arrive in my lifetime. As a science fiction fan, I'd always assumed that they would arrive sooner or later, but I thought it would be hundreds of years after I was dead. And ever since then, I've been thinking about this and what it means, its impact. And I've been also thinking about how to get other people to think about it too, which has proved to be a surprisingly difficult exercise. Fast forward another 12 years, I semi-retired, which gave me time to do something about it. And what I did was to write a book called Pandora's Brain. It's a novel, it's a scientific thriller about the arrival of AI. And I also have a blog which has got the same name, Pandora's Brain. These are the 6 questions that I've been thinking about in that time. Can we make an artificial general intelligence, a human-level AI? If so, when? Will it lead to superintelligence? Will that superintelligence harm us? Can we upload our minds into computers? And can we make it a risk-free transition? As you can tell, I've gone a little bit off-piste in that some of this stuff goes well beyond 2025. I've got 3 messages I'd like to leave with everybody. The first is uncertainty. I'm not going to give you answers to any of these questions, possibly to number 3, but certainly not to any of the others. And I don't think anybody else can give you answers either. The science in this area is not settled, and I don't think anybody knows the answers. The second theme is risk. Superintelligence is really risky. I think there's no point denying that. And the third is preparation. As a species, we need to prepare for this stuff. We need to prepare for superintelligence in particular, and we're not doing it. My niece is in the audience. I can't see where she is at the moment. And she had a conversation that only my niece would have. She talked to a London bus driver on the way here. And when she told him what she was doing today, he said, well, haven't you got anything better to do with Sunday morning? And that's what we have to overcome. I'm going to fast forward through these slides. I looked at them last night, thought they were a bit boring, and you're very nice. You don't deserve to be bored. So can we make an AGI? Can we make a human-level artificial intelligence? As I say, we don't know. It's very hard, though. It's going to be very hard. Imagine if you could give 1,000 pieces of string to every single inhabitant in New York City. each of them carrying up to 200 messages a second. And the other ends of each of those pieces of string is going to another inhabitant in New York. Now multiply that city by a factor of 10,000. And that is a model of the human brain. Every one of you here has got something like that inside your heads, the 3.5 pounds of amazing gloop inside of our heads. And that's just the hardware. If consciousness, if AGI was simply an emergent property of a sufficient amount of data processing, the internet would have woken up by now, as it does in Robert Sawyer's trilogy, Wake, Watch, and Wonder. As well as the hardware, we need the software, or the architecture, the wiring diagram. And broadly speaking, there's 3 ways to get that. The first is reverse engineering, where an existing brain, ultimately a human brain, is analyzed and mapped by slicing it very, very thinly. This is what's going on at the EU-funded €1 billion human brain project led by Henry Markram in Lausanne. And it's also what's going on in President Obama's brain project. And this week, those 2 projects have just announced that they're going to formally collaborate, which I think is pretty good news. The second approach is incremental development. That's where you take existing best-in-class narrow AI systems which do search, natural language programming, deep learning. You feed them tons and tons of data, and you incrementally improve them with trial and error. Now, and that's what Google is doing, and it's what IBM is doing, Watson, and a lot of other people are doing as well. Interestingly, neither of those 2 approaches requires you to understand how a human brain works before you build one. People like Marvin Minsky and Gary Marcus think you do have to. They think you can't do it without knowing what you're doing in the beginning. I think that's an unwarranted assumption, and I also think it's a really hard way to do it. Will any of those approaches work? As I'm not going to apologize for keep saying, we don't know. Here's a bunch of reasons why people give, that people give for maybe why it won't work. The first one is that maybe it's not enough to take a snapshot of a brain at a single time. Maybe you need time series data. Another one is maybe the model has to capture detail well below the neuronal level, perhaps at the subatomic level. These 2 reasons would be serious setbacks. These 2 issues would be serious setbacks, but they would only delay the process, maybe quite a long time, but they would only delay the process. They wouldn't make it impossible. The other 2 would probably make it impossible, but I think they're implausible. The idea that consciousness is somehow a strange quantum phenomenon based in microtubules and you can never track it seems pretty implausible to me. And even more implausible to me is the idea that we have souls, and that means we can't replicate minds. But we do have a problem with this one, because most of our fellow humans on this planet believe that we have souls. I think maybe transhumanists, this is a controversial comment, maybe transhumanists should be militant atheists. Maybe we should all sign up for a Dawkins approach. So I've yet to come across a decent argument as to why we can't build an AGI. And one thing we do know is that there's a very great deal of money being spent on doing it. So when might it happen? Well, both the hardware and the software are driven by this man's law. And I don't think we should worry terribly much about the fact that he himself is fairly skeptical about AGI being created anytime soon. We've talked quite a lot about forecasts, so I won't bother with that. People argue about how long Moore's law is going to carry on. Well, in terms of the hardware, we're actually not far off what we need. In 4 years' time, the very large telescope array with dishes in Australia and South Africa and processing in Manchester, in Jodrell Bank near Manchester, will be up and running. And that will be processing at the exaflop scale, which is, as I'm sure everybody here knows, 1 followed by 18 noughts. Interestingly, it will produce produce half as much data as the entire internet does now, and that's in 4 years' time. This is an interesting illustration of the power of exponentials. Quantum computing has for a long time been seen as a possible savior for Moore's law. Although we're nearly there in terms of the hardware capacity, we will need Moore's law to carry on to do the software side. And there are some caveats, but it is looking increasingly likely that D-Wave is actually making genuine quantum computers. Ray Kurzweil, of course, has been saying for a long time that AGI's due date is 2029, with uploading coming along 16 years later. Anders Sandberg's boss, Nick Bostrom, did a survey a while ago in which he found that 50% of neuroscientists, 50% of people working in this space, think that we'll have AGI by 2050, which is, I think, quite a significant finding. We probably won't have it by 2025, the year that we're anticipating in this conference. However, what I think we will have is a greater awareness that it's coming. And that will be through domestic robots, it'll be through driverless cars, it'll be through all the things that we've been talking about. That awareness is very important because we've got a big job to do and we need awareness to make it possible. Will AGI, artificial general intelligence, lead to superintelligence? This is the only one I think we can be reasonably confident of, because I think the answer is yes. An AGI can be expanded, speeded up, and its architecture improved in ways that the human brain can't. So yes, I think AGI will lead to superintelligence. What we don't know is whether it'll be a slow process or a quick process. If it's a quick process, it's quite likely to happen during the lifetime of people in this room, particularly if they're only 13 years old. Hi, Lauren. Embarrassed daughter, proud dad. So, will superintelligence harm us? The range of scenarios for what happens when if and when superintelligence arrives are quite broad. You've got optimists like Ray Kurzweil who say that we will upload our brains into computers, merge with the superintelligence and zoom off into the universe and behave like gods. Well, I hope he's right. He might be right. Or maybe they will help us. Maybe we can't merge with them, but they will help us. They'll solve all our economic, environmental, technical, social and psychological problems. A bit like the minds in Ian M. Banks' Culture, perhaps. Then there's some okay but disappointing scenarios. Then there's some scenarios which are pretty grim. And then there's some scenarios which are, frankly, absolutely bloody terrifying. And I don't take these lightly. I think these are realistic scenarios. And the Terminator is not the worst scenario. Interestingly, it looks as if Hollywood isn't quite as pessimistic as we all think. Now, how much do we know about which of these is actually going to happen? There are people who say that a superintelligence will necessarily be more civilized than us and it will be benign. I think that is a mere supposition. I think there's no evidence for that whatsoever. It's a perfectly reasonable possibility that a superintelligence could look around at our history and say, you humans don't play with strangers very nicely. I'm going to wipe you out because you're a threat to me and I'm more important than you are. Equally, in Eliza Yudkowsky's famous phrase, it could say, well, I don't like you, I don't dislike you, but I've got better uses for the atoms that you're made of. On the other hand, you've got pessimists who say that a superintelligence will necessarily be bad for us unless we take positive steps to make it good for us. Obviously, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute is the primary proponent of that idea. Again, I think it's mere supposition. There's no evidence for thinking that at all. The truth is we simply don't know. We don't know which of these outcomes is going to happen, regardless how brilliant the proponents of different outcomes are. One thing I think we can be confident of, we cannot stop the march towards superintelligence. If it's possible, it will happen. And that's because the advantage of owning one for any government, any business, and particularly any army, is simply something people can't resist. Relinquishment won't work. It's therefore amazing to me that so few people and so few organizations are thinking seriously about these risks. As I said, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute is one of the leading ones. They're based exactly where you'd expect to find them in Northern California. The other two, oddly, are based here in England. One of them at my old university, and the other one at some place in the bogs over in East Anglia. Now, almost by definition, we can't predict or predetermine what a superintelligence's goals will be. The whole point of Isaac Asimov's stories was that the three laws of robotics would not work. And really, how could we possibly hope to program a system of ethics into a superintelligence when we've made no progress on agreeing what that should be since the ancient Greeks? So personally, I think the best option may be an Oracle AI, by which I mean an AI which is in a cage and is unable to influence the material world. I was pleased to hear from Anders just before this that this is a solution which, although a lot of people think is impossible, hasn't entirely been ruled out. I'm glad to hear that, because I really think it may be our only option apart from trusting to blind luck. Okay, the most optimistic scenario is Ray Kurzweil's, that we upload our minds into computers and merge with the superintelligence and zoom off to explore the universe. Is that possible? It certainly isn't easy. To upload a live brain will involve really, really advanced nanotechnology for a start. And maybe it's not even possible philosophically, never mind technologically. Maybe uploading is simply making a copy of yourself. And I have a disagreement with my partner over this. Julia thinks that that's what it is. And to paraphrase Woody Allen, she's not interested in making in immortality or surviving death by making copies of herself. She wants to survive death by surviving death, which is fair enough. If uploading simply makes a copy of you and doesn't preserve you, maybe we should call it sideloading rather than uploading. And by analogy, maybe beaming Captain Kirk up is simply killing him here and making a copy of him over there. This problem actually, like most philosophical problems, goes back to the ancient Greeks, who knew it as the ship of Theseus problem. And for my money, that's where I disagree with Julia, I think it's more or less resolved by the thought experiment, or the intuition pump if you prefer, that where your brain is, your carbon brain is replaced, neuron by neuron, with silicon. At the end of that process, the resulting entity would most certainly think it was still you, and it would be really hard to say at what point in the process it had stopped being you. So I do think that's a fairly helpful thought experiment. It does, of course, mean that we'll have some really weird paradoxes around personal identity. If you can upload a mind and actually preserve the original brain, you end up with two people, and then you can obviously have lots and lots of people who both think that they are the same person. And so which one gets the kids? Which one gets the house and the record collection? Now, these are, serious issues, serious philosophical issues, but I do think there are satisfactory answers. Can we make the transition towards superintelligence less risky? Let's have a look at let's review the failure modes. If AGI isn't possible or doesn't lead to superintelligence, there'll be a lot of disappointed geeks, including me, despite my concerns about superintelligence. But the ones we really want to avoid are these two. Firstly, that superintelligence harms us, either deliberately or accidentally, or that uploading is impossible or unaffordable for a long time, such that, for instance, an entire generation dies while waiting for it to become available. So I think we need two new Apollo projects. I prefer the term Apollo projects to Manhattan projects for obvious reasons. We've got one, which is the one moving us towards AGI and superintelligence. The first new one we need is friendly artificial intelligence. The task of trying to make the transition to superintelligence less risky, and there are too few people working on this. And the second one is to abolish death, or rather make it optional. It would just be awful to be one of the last generation of people who knew that immortality was around the corner, or at least, a very long life, and didn't get it because it was too expensive. To do that, we need to arrive at longevity escape velocity, and we need brain preservation techniques like cryonics, and I'm sorry, Natasha, and/or brain plastination. Now, these are expensive projects. Some of the money will come from very rich geeks, God bless them. Google's Calico and Craig Venter's Human Longevity, Inc. Are very exciting ventures. But most of the money is going to have to come from governments. Now, governments will only do this work, but they will do this work if people demand it. People will demand it if they understand it. And they'll understand it if they talk about it. That makes me think that all of us here in this room have a very important job. We have to get people talking about superintelligence. Not as a rapture of the nerds, that just alienates people, but as a potential future, a real potential future for humanity that we need to prepare for. We need to get as much talent and, frankly, as much money onto these problems as we can. The awareness will grow as narrow artificial intelligence becomes more and more powerful. But we need as many people as we can get talking about this in order to prepare for our very risky future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the audience? Start over here.
Thank you. I'm Joe. Two things. One is the possibility that one of these takeoffs will be done in a specific country. I'm thinking China. And the other one is, how do you see that risk in terms of playing a role in influencing government to do something in the UK, US, etc.?
You're absolutely right. It could happen in China. It might be happening right now, AGI. It might not be very many years off. Probably is. It's probably beyond 25, but we just don't know. My guess is it will happen in America. That's where most of the money is, let's face it. They probably got the best technologists. But it could happen in China, it could happen in Russia. Probably won't happen in North Korea, but maybe. I didn't really understand your second question about how do I feel about risk as a means of motivating governments. Is that what you're saying?
To use that as a strategic
Okay.
then get funding.
Got you. I don't think we can go direct to government. I think we have to go through people, personally. I think we need to get people concerned about this. And I think Hollywood has a role. I think that the Transcendence movie that's coming along will actually make quite a big impact. But I think that the increasing availability of better and better narrow ASI is the thing that will wake people up, and then people demand that governments do things.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi there. I was wondering, I listened to an interview with Henry Markram about the Human Brain Project, and he always talks in terms of we're going to do this so we can understand depression or better neuroscience for schizophrenia or something. He always talks in these terms, or so we don't have to test on mice anymore. I've never once heard him say we're doing this to make some kick-ass AGI. Have you heard him say that? Is he that what he's working on?
I have heard him say that he's creating a model of a human brain, but you know what? If you were pitching for the EU for €1 billion, would you talk about creating a kick-ass AGI? Or would you talk about solving current day problems? He's a smart man.
Hi, Danny Barnett. I'm rather perplexed by this value that people put in immortality as this uploadable thing, because I think one of the benefits of death is that it gives value to individual human life. And once you have a infinitely copyable and modifiable version of me loaded up, I, as a person, probably don't matter that much.
Okay, well, that's fine for you. You can switch off anytime you like. Personally, I don't think death gives meaning to my life. I don't want to die. And maybe I will in the future, then I will. But I didn't mean to be flippant, I'm serious. I think that I personally don't believe that death gives meaning to my life. Sorry, I really don't mean to be flippant.
One last question over here.
Hi, it's Dean Bubley. Do you see the probability that AGI is going to happen accidentally, or on purpose? And if it's on purpose, presumably the way the software is developed and tested, and the way it's configured, is going to have a very large impact on what happens next. So I'm thinking that a lot of this comes down to sort of software engineering, software testing, whether there are 5 different versions of the same software application with slightly different settings that are tested. How much of this is sort of basic sort of computing good practice?
Yeah, I think the outcome probably does depend to a very significant extent how it's arrived at. I've got a hunch, just a hunch, I'm not a neuroscientist. I've got a hunch that an AGI based on a human mind is likely to be more sympathetic to us increasingly inferior humans than something that is entirely alien, which has grown up through extending narrow AI, better and better narrow AI. And also my hunch is that it's probably easier to do it that route, what I call the reverse engineering route, the mapping route, because we have existence proof that works. Our brains are existence proof that approach works. So that's my hunch about the most likely way for it to happen and also the best way for it to happen. But, you know, it's a huge, great field of uncertainty out there. We just don't know.
One last question.
Yeah, Didier Carnel. My opinion is that artificial intelligence is incredibly dangerous. Well, it's your opinion also, and I agree that it's almost impossible to stop. But what about making really a priority to improve the human brain by artificial methods in place of creating an artificial intelligence? Because at least we know a little bit more about our brain than about an hypothetical new intelligence.
Yeah, great. Let's do everything we can to improve our body plan, and you know, all those transhumanist ideals are great. But people are still going to create an AGI, and then it is probably going to become a superintelligence. I just think that train is not going to stop, however much we might like it to, and so we're going to have to face those risks.
Thank you.